All right, guys. Well, who's ready to jump into John Oliver? Who's ready? Who's ready to watch this shit show? Look at some of the screen grabs that Rufo posted. Who's ready to watch this shit show and react to it together? Go ahead, mount that like button if you are ready to watch this colossal shit show that was John Oliver. And in the meantime, while you guys are working on that, I'm going to get it up in a different browser so we can actually hear the sound, because hearing the sound would be ideal for a reaction video. Okay, share screen. Chrome tab. Critical Race Theory last week tonight with John Oliver. I haven't watched John Oliver in a while. Yes, M169. Yes, we do. We do. This is going to be, listen, Chris Rufo was very excited about this segment. I think this is going to be great. All right, guys, let me just check in. Realize says, I'm at Clark Griswold's drinking eggnog level. Well, excellent. I think that is an excellent play. Oh man, we missed it. Eggnog season is over now. I kind of want eggnog, Realize. Jeez. Eggnog is pretty good. Okay, we've got some folks. We have people watching on Rockfin. We've got people watching on Rumble. We got people watching on Odyssey, and of course on YouTube. We're ready to go. All right, guys. Let's get this reaction video started. Naruto says, it's my birthday week. I posted a story suggestion. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to one of my longest supporters, my longest lasting supporters. You've been around since the beginning, dude. You send me stories all the time that I really appreciate, and I want you to know that I really appreciate you. I don't always say thank you enough, but I really do appreciate it. Happy birthday, my friend Naruto. All right, let's get this party started, guys. Reacting now. And of course, let me know if you can't hear the sound for whatever reason.
Moving on. Our main story tonight concerns school. It's the only setting in which a child dissecting a frog is not an immediate red flag. We teach kids a lot in school, from reading to long division
you
to
don't teach
how
them
to
that.
play the fucking recorder for some reason. But
just for the record, they don't actually teach people how to read or do division or even, you know what? Honestly, see, John Oliver needs to watch our anti-racist math series, because I really think right now students are more likely to play the recorder in math class than they are to actually learn how to do long division. Because playing the recorder would be like math of the ancestors, and we have to allow students to learn the math in the way that they feel most accustomed to. And so I would actually, we're not teaching any of those things, John. Sorry.
Recently, there's been a lot of concern over one particular thing that people worry that kids are learning.
Critical race theory is being taught in our schools.
Yes.
True. Critical race theory is bunk.
Critical race theory is a lie.
True.
From the first word to the last, from start to finish.
Racist critical race theory.
Critical race theory.
Critical race theory in the schools and the wokeness.
Let me tell you right now, critical race theory is bigoted, it is a lie, and it is every bit as racist as the Klansmen in white sheets.
All these things are true.
I do not like that Ted Cruz man. I do not like him shouting Klan. I do not like him in a room. I do not like him in Cancun. I do not like him playing ball. I do not like his face at all. I wish he'd lose his cushy job. That man Ted Cruz is a fucking knob. But here's the thing. It is true.
Okay, that was actually kind of clever. I'm sorry. That was a little bit clever. I don't mind Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is fine. That was a little bit clever. But he has not said anything of substance about critical race theory yet, and let's just acknowledge that. And this is why John Oliver gets away with this bullshit. This is how no one realizes that John Oliver has no fucking idea what he's talking about at all. Because it's like he segments into a joke and says something's funny, and it was funny. Listen, we need to give credit where credit is due. That was funny. It was not a substantive takedown of anything that any of them said, though. But maybe we'll get there. Maybe we will.
You have probably heard people yelling about critical race theory on TV for more than a year now. And people have been listening.
Who wants to bet that at some point he's going to say that we don't even know how to define critical race theory? Who wants to bet that's going to happen? I'm going to preempt that right now. Critical race theory is an ideology that started in academia in the 1970s that says that racism exists everywhere, in every person, in everything, in every interaction, and that the job of the critical race theorist is to explore how, not if, how racism occurs in every circumstance, because racism is always assumed to have occurred. James Lindsay would define critical race theory as the belief that racism is the fundamental organizing principle of society. Let's just preempt that argument entirely. AD says John Oliver is committing the same Mott and Bailey as every other progressive on critical race theory. Well, let's see what he has to say, shall we?
To that noise, especially judging by what's been happening at school board meetings across the country.
Yeah. Good.
Western culture and values that brought forth Christianity in the founding documents are being called evil and racist.
I'm not co-parenting with the government. It is not your job to force these ideas onto my child.
That woman is a hero. Yes. I like all of these people so far. These people are great.
Narrative in this country is that we're all inherently racist, and I'm about sick of it.
Yes.
It's a Marxist ideology.
Yes.
And we all know it.
All of these lessons have the intent to make our children feel disgust towards our nation.
Yes.
This country isn't even a racist country. We elected Obama for 2 terms.
Wait, hold on. Hold on. America can't.
Every single one of those moms that they just showed was awesome. Every single one of them was correct in what they were saying. And I especially liked that big old kind of like rowdy mob at the beginning. Listen, you don't. I just wrote an article on Substack today that was basically about like, we need to start playing the psychological game with these people. And I would never advocate for violence. I would never advocate for destroying people's stuff. We need like those lines you do not cross. But I don't mind if school boards are scared. I don't mind if school boards are afraid of parents that are angry at what the school boards are doing. Parents should be goddamn angry. They should be angry. That's what it should be. And I don't care if the school board likes it or not. They are elected to serve the community. That is their one and only job.
Can't be racist because of Obama? I don't know if you remember the 2008 election, but things got pretty racist back then. People kept saying he was born in Kenya. People said he was a secret Muslim. And then a few years later, we elected that people president. So let's just agree to disagree on that one, shall we?
That's not evidence against
That first meeting
CRT,
was in
John.
Loudoun County, Virginia. And it got so out of hand that the meeting was shut down early. And one guy passionately railing against CRT.
Who remembers why that guy was arrested? Who remembers why that guy was arrested? I remember why he was arrested. Let's see if John knows.
Was arrested for trespassing, only to pop up on Tucker Carlson the very next day. So clearly, a lot of people are getting very mad about critical race theory right now. And instinctively, you probably know.
Okay. Maybe it was a different dude, but there was definitely someone that was arrested at a school board meeting. It was either in Loudoun or Fairfax County that was actually upset that his child was assaulted in school. Yeah, exactly. The grape of his child. Yeah, exactly. That, of course, we're not going to talk about that, are we? Oh my God. Patricia said his daughter was injured at school. Yes, that's exactly right. That was not about, that was, I'm pretty sure that was the same guy. But even if it wasn't, it doesn't really matter. Loudoun County was one of the epicenters of this fight.
No, it's a manufactured panic.
No.
The fact is, the fear around it is having real effects. Last year, Glenn Youngkin won the governor's race in Virginia after repeatedly promising that on his first day in office, he'd ban CRT from being taught in schools. Multiple states have passed laws outlawing the teaching of it, and Republicans are likely to make it a major focus of the midterm.
Because they're being smart for once.
When it comes to critical race theory, think of it like Rihanna's pregnancy. Even if you think it has nothing to do with you, believe me, you're going to be hearing a lot about it this year.
John, you haven't even defined critical race theory yet. I wonder if John Oliver even knows what critical race theory is. Has John Oliver defined critical race theory yet, other than saying a lot of people are talking about this thing called critical race theory? John, do you even know what critical race theory is? We've already defined it. Let's hear you define it. We're only 3 minutes in.
So given that, we thought tonight we'd take a step back and look at what critical race theory is and isn't.
Excellent.
Why the panic around it has spread and what the consequences might be for everyone involved. And I realise some of you may already know what CRT is. After all, explainers on it have become one of the most common sites on the internet, along with mediocre Wordle scores and ugly monkey JPEGs sold by and for dipshits. But many are still very confused. A recent survey found that an overwhelming majority of US residents have a hard time articulating exactly what CRT is. And that even goes.
We've already defined it.
Been yelling about it.
We've already defined it, John.
I've never figured out what a critical race theory is, to be totally honest, after a year of talking about it. They're teaching that some races are morally superior to others, that some are inherently sinful and some are inherently saintly, and that's immoral to teach that because it's wrong.
Wow. I don't know if I...
Okay, for real, this is why conservatives this is where conservatives screw up. Tucker Carlson should be able to define goddamn critical race theory. He should be able to define it. I can do it off the top of my head. So can Chris Rufo. So can James Lindsay. So can many of you. Every single one of you that comes to my happy hour streams on Friday is better equipped to define critical race theory than every conservative pundit ever. We all know how to define it.
I've ever seen a person confidently complain about something.
It's not
just
hard to define.
seconds
Hang on.
after-
Ego brain. It is not hard to define. I can define it in a single tweet. And if you can't remember my definition because it's a little long, you can use James Lindsay's definition, which is critical race theory is the belief that racism is the fundamental organizing principle of society. That's it. That's all you need to memorize. Critical race theory is the belief that racism is the fundamental organizing principle of society. That's not hard.
After admitting they don't know shit about it. Look, I've never figured out how a car engine works, to be honest, but there's a chimpanzee under the hood turning a crank, and when you press the accelerator, it pokes it with a sharp
You
stick
still
and
haven't
makes
defined it,
crank
John.
faster, and it's
You
immoral
still
to do
haven't
that
defined
because
it.
it's wrong.
What is it?
But obviously, that is not what critical race theory is. It's the name given to a body of legal scholarship that began in the 1970s that attempted to understand why racism and inequality persisted after the civil rights movement.
So John Oliver agrees with my definition. Thank you, John. John Oliver just endorsed my definition of critical race theory. Thank you, John Oliver, for your endorsement.
The core idea is that racism is not merely the product of individual bias or prejudice, but
My
also
definition.
something that is embedded in legal systems and policies. As for Tucker's notion that it teaches that some races are superior to others, or that parents claim that it teaches kids to hate America, none of that is remotely true.
No, John Oliver is a liar. John Oliver is a liar. It absolutely does teach children to hate America. It teaches children that America was founded on racism, that it started in 1619 when the first slave arrived from Africa, which is different, of course, than 1776. A little bit different. They teach that racism was invented in America. They teach that America is the homeland of racism because before people came to America, they weren't considered white. They actually believed that whiteness was created in America, and it was created by English and Spanish and European and all the German. So basically what they say is that people from like Germany or England or Spain or any of those other countries over on the other continent, when they came here, they stopped referring to themselves as English or French or German, and they started referring to themselves as white. And the reason that they started referring to themselves as white was to differentiate themselves from the slaves that came here, proving that America was founded on racism because it started when the slaves came here, and that the entire goal of these newly white settlers was to build up a society that only supported white people. That is the very basis of what systemic racism is. Look, I know more about this subject than John Oliver. I know we're all shocked.
As Kimberly Crenshaw, one of CRT's leading scholars, points out.
Critical race theory just says, let's pay attention to what has happened in this country and how what has happened in this country is continuing to create differential outcomes so we can become that country that we say we are. So critical race theory is not anti-patriotic. In fact, it is more patriotic than those who are opposed to it because we believe in the 13th and the 14th and the 15th Amendment. We believe in the promises of equality, and we know we can't get there if we can't confront and talk honestly about inequality.
Critical race theorists don't even use the word equality. They use the word equity. I would be completely fine if they were talking about equality. They don't even use that word. So the difference for people who are new between equality and equity is equality is what Martin Luther King preached. And by the way, they don't like to talk about how he preached this. Equality is the idea that everyone has access to the same opportunities, regardless of your skin color or your gender or any of the other things. Equal access to opportunity. What these people want, and this includes Kimberly Crenshaw, who we have watched several times on my happy hour stream, preaching about the virtues of equity. Equity is not the same as equality. Equity is about equality of outcome. She just said this is about reducing racial disparities. So Ibram X. Kendi says that racism exists anytime a racial disparity exists in outcome. except when it comes to getting vaccinated. Because Ibram X. Kendi is not worried about the fact that African Americans are much less likely to be vaccinated than white people. That disparity doesn't matter to them. But every other racial outcome disparity to these people is an indication of racism. They are not interested in providing equal access to opportunity. They are only interested in lowering the disparity of outcome. That means they want everyone to end up in the same place. Life doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. There are many reasons why people do not have the same types of outcomes. It could be they aren't taught to show up. They don't work hard. They don't do the things that they need to do in order to be successful. But what they're talking about is we have to have equal outcomes regardless of why the disparity in outcome even exists, because they have to assume that the disparity in outcome exists because of systemic racism. That is the entire basis for the idea of systemic racism. Moving on.
Yeah, she's right. And incidentally, if you just found yourself there,
I'm just going to pretend that applause was for me.
14th and 15th Amendments
that applause was for me.
That alone might be a good sign that we don't talk about this stuff in schools enough. And to be clear, CRT is graduate level legal theory. So unless your 5-year-old is currently pursuing a law degree, they're not reading Kimberly Crenshaw.
Everyone go do a search on Amazon right now for critical race theory in education and see how many books come up. Now, if critical race theory is only taught in graduate level law schools, then why would there be any books available at all about teaching critical race theory? In fact, let me just do it. Hang on. We're going to do it live. We are going to do it live. F this. F this. I've had enough. Critical race theory education. I'm going to show you guys. Hang on. Let me just get the other window. And you can see exactly what I'm doing, because we're not going to hide stuff from you like John Oliver is. We're not going to do that. Critical race theory education. I went on Amazon. I said critical race theory education. Critical race theory and education. Critical race theory and education. Critical race theory and education. DisCrit, which is disability studies in critical race theory and education. Critical race theory and mathematics education. A parent's guide to critical race theory. I'm sorry. If critical race theory was just a graduate level legal course, then why do we need a parent's guide to critical race theory? The handbook of critical race theory in education. Why does this even need to exist if critical race theory only exists in graduate school? Critical race theory in teacher education. Critical race theory in education. Critical race theory matters. Education and ideology. The handbook of critical race theory in education. Racial microaggressions. African-centered education. See, we're getting into the other ones down here. But you can see there's a dozen books, at least right now, on Amazon. Critical race theory in education. If critical race theory was just a graduate level legal workshop that was only taught in law schools, then why would these books even exist in the goddamn first place? Let's go back to our video, shall we? Let's go back to that video. This is why I'm losing my hair. This is why I have no hair. Okay, let's do it.
But critics of it argue that the ideas behind CRT are being taught in schools and often present a hyperbolically distorted version of what those ideas
Enter
are.
Rufo.
The key person here is this man, a conservative activist
the
named
king!
Christopher Rufo.
The king himself has
CRT
entered
is
the building.
A revolutionary program that would overturn the principles of the Declaration and destroy the remaining structure of the Constitution, which it just isn't. It isn't that. But in the wake of the George Floyd protests,
what is it? So I want you to notice John Oliver has yet to actually present a definition. He played Kimberly Crenshaw talking about how critical race theory is not all that bad, and it's about just addressing outcomes, and it's about equality. John Oliver himself has not yet defined critical race theory. You can't get this over on us, John. We watch this shit every goddamn week. We know what's going on.
As America was beginning to grapple with systemic racism, Fox News began featuring Rufo on air a lot as part of their efforts to swing that pendulum back hard. And in one appearance, he pointed to diversity trainings in government as evidence of CRT's influence. And he spoke directly to President Trump through the camera about what he wanted to see happen.
The president and the White House, it's within their authority and power to immediately issue an executive order abolishing critical race theory trainings from the federal government. And I call on the president to immediately issue this executive order and stamp out this destructive, divisive, pseudoscientific ideology at its root.
Now, did
The king,
Trump see that?
the king.
I don't know.
Yes,
Is
he
the
did.
Pope a Catholic?
Yes,
Is
he did.
the reason Big died the fact that Carrie didn't call 911 fast enough? The answer to all those questions is yes, and also, she was right not to do it. No big loss. Because Mark Meadows, Trump's chief of staff, has since revealed President Trump saw that interview, and when Rufo said, I call on the president to immediately issue this executive order, quote, that's what we did. Which is weird.
Hang on. John, you are not cracking the case here. Chris Rufo literally has the fucking pen from the executive order. You're not cracking the goddamn case by discovering that Donald Trump issued the executive order because Chris Rufo went on Tucker Carlson. This story has been covered. This is not even a mystery of what happened. Chris Rufo went on Tucker Carlson. The executive order was issued like the next goddamn day. Chris Rufo has the pen in his office.
Should be more steps than that. It shouldn't just go, 1, yell your wish at the president, then 2, it happens. Ideally, you want an executive branch that's a little more complicated than fucking Siri. And with that, CRT, or crucially, Rufo's definition of it, was suddenly absolutely everywhere. Fox News kept pushing it, mentioning the term critical race theory nearly 5,000 times last year alone. And the network zeroed in on its supposed use in schools, with Rufo telling Fox's audience that CRT has really become the default ideology of the public education system.
True.
And what Rufo has been cleverly doing is cherry-picking the worst examples that he can find of lessons in classrooms or training materials for teachers and saying, that is CRT. And he's openly admitted that he's been engaged in a deliberate rebranding exercise, tweeting, we have successfully frozen their brand, critical race theory, into the public conversation and are steadily driving up negative perceptions.
Okay, so listen, you guys know I have mixed feelings about this language game that Rufo is playing. I do. I understand why he's doing it because this is about public perception and people don't have the time to be able to dig into this stuff as much as I do. So I do have mixed feelings about this. I think they're being too broadly generalized in terms of especially delineating things like social emotional learning from critical race theory, because social emotional learning is very, very different than critical race theory. And right now, mostly because of, well, not, I shouldn't say mostly, at least partially because of what Rufo's doing in the game that he's playing, those two terms are being really conflated. And I think that's dangerous. And I think that's bad. And I think it's going to lead parents to believe that if critical race theory is banned, social emotional learning is banned, which is not the truth. But, here's the thing. I do understand and appreciate why he's doing what he's doing in terms of branding everything that's going on in schools as critical race theory, simply because this is a perception game. It is a language game. Language is the primary weapon that the left uses against us all the time. And so if he can get negative perception of critical race theory driven up, that is going to make it much more likely that he's actually going to be able to implement policies, get bills passed, work with people in the positions to actually do something about it. It's going to make it much more likely that those things are actually going to happen because the public opinion will be behind it. And I'm going to say this too. The Democrats did not learn anything at all from Virginia in terms of Youngkin winning, and they are still doubling down on critical race theory as something they are in favor of going into the 2022 midterms. I pray that Republicans continue to double down on critical race theory as their number one issue to be against, because if they get distracted by like abortion or porn or any of the other things that Republicans get distracted by, it is going to be a monumental missed opportunity. What Chris Rufo has done in the course of a year and a half is incredible. It is incredible. He has, as a direct result of his work, 30% of students in this country are now protected, at least to some extent, from being taught critical race theory in schools. This momentum has got to continue. Republicans have got to take this seriously, and I think that's why he's doing this thing with language, where he's branding everything as critical race theory. I think it's going to have consequences, but I'm okay with it for the moment, I suppose.
The goal is to have the public read something crazy in the newspaper and immediately think critical race theory.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it fucking worked. Because whenever you hear CRT now, you are not hearing about the academic discipline. You're hearing about a category so broad, it encompasses both the craziest thing in the newspaper and also, crucially, any conversation about race that someone does not want to have.
No.
And look, I am not saying discussing race in a classroom is easy or even always done well. Experts in this field will readily admit that.
Now, have you seen bad implementations of this?
Of course, right? That's like asking, have I seen a bad math lesson? Right? Like, yes, teachers are humans, especially as we're trying to figure out how to teach about race and racism.
Exactly.
So the problem with this is that you're experimenting on children who are not in a position to defend themselves, and you're telling children that they have to agree with you and are not allowed to ask questions about what you're teaching them. This woman, like John Oliver doesn't. Okay, so first of all, John Oliver just admitted that what Chris Rufo is doing is actually working, which, like, winning, that's not a bad thing. But this woman does not understand that you should not be experimenting on impressionable children in schools. That shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening. The fact that, like, John Oliver showing a teacher saying, yeah, we don't really know what we're doing and we're getting some stuff wrong, that's not good, John. And this is the theme that is developed in this whole fight, is people are always out. Let's just defend the teachers. The teachers are so put upon. The teachers have it so hard. The teachers are working in such a tough environment and they have so much depression and anxiety. It is not about the teachers. It is about the students. It is not about the adults. It is about the children. We're not talking about the children right now. We're talking about the teachers. We just need to be comfortable with the teachers and just let them figure it out. No, they're figuring it out while they're fucking up the children. Oh, sorry. I got a little fiery just then. Sorry.
Teachers are human and can make mistakes. Frankly, I'm surprised they don't make more. They wake up insanely early and spend all day getting low-key roasted by teenagers for an amount of money best described as completely harrowing. The very fact any student in America knows what a covalent bond is a fucking miracle, and every adult involved deserves the Congressional Medal of Honor. And the fact is, you can find examples of clumsy, shitty lessons. One school used a privilege bingo card, which sure seems like a glib way to handle a very serious subject. Another classic lesson over the years has been to teach about prejudice metaphorically by dividing a classroom up by eye colour, with brown-eyed people, for instance, being the lowest tier and then being treated terribly. And if you do that in a diverse classroom and think for even a second about who is more likely to have brown eyes, you can probably immediately see just how badly that lesson could go.
These are the things that are obviously bad, but what we watch on Happy Hour are the things that John Oliver would actually approve of. So I actually have a video on this channel. I reference it all the time. If you search on my channel for 8th grade class, you are going to watch them teach critical race theory in a way that John Oliver would completely approve of. Because what's going to happen is these are 14-year-olds. I have the entire 8th grade class. It took there about 30 minutes to get through this module, where the teacher's like, you believe in the Pledge of Allegiance, don't you? And you believe that things should be fair and just for all, don't you? And the children, because they're 13 years old, go, yes, we believe in fairness. And then the teacher goes, well, racism means that some people in America are treated differently than others. Do you think that that's fair? And the children go, no. That is not fair. And then the teacher goes, and the reason that people are treated differently is because of systemic racism. And systemic racism is the idea that society fundamentally disadvantages Black children over white children. Do you think that's fair? No, we don't. And then she teaches them about equity, which is, again, equity is about equality of outcomes. It is not about equality of opportunity. She specifically differentiates between equality and equity, promoting that equity is the thing we should be going for. And by the end, she's got this class of students saying, yes, equity is what we want. That is how they're teaching it in schools. And that is something that John Oliver would completely agree with. He would completely agree with it. So yes, Chris Rufo does present outlandish examples of CRTs. So do I. So do many people who have been looking into this stuff for a while. But the problem is that the outlandish examples aren't actually the worst thing. The worst thing is the teachers teaching it in the way that people like John Oliver would approve of, because that is actually the most detrimental. That is the thing, teaching children that racism is the fundamental organizing principle of society. That is the thing, teaching children that they grow up in a fundamentally racist country. That is the thing that teaches white children that they are fundamentally oppressors. That is the thing that teaches Black children that they can only succeed if white people allow them to. The fact that schools are teaching children that Black kids can only succeed in a world where white people lower themselves to allow Black children to succeed, that is one of the most racist ideas I have ever heard in my life. Critical race theory is racist. It teaches children to be racist, and it teaches it from a very young age so that when they grow up, it's really hard to undo that damage. Realize says they're handing out limbo bars, which my daughter got a conclusion from and told what happens on the playground stays on the playground. Isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? And then Realize also says metal limbo bars. Thank you, Realize, for that.
That actually happened in at least one school in the Chicago area. And the reason I know that is that this kid was in the class that day and she's one of our writers now. Ali, what did you think of that lesson?
It was pretty fucked up.
Yeah, I bet it was. But the fact is, many educators are working very hard to find age-appropriate ways to talk about race and racism in the classroom. And
Why?
if you do it right, you don't stop at the civil rights movement. You tell the story all the way to the present day, which kids want and need. They have questions about what they can see with their own eyes, and they deserve good answers. And it is, frankly, far better for them to have these discussions in a supportive, educational environment rather than the...
Does anyone in the chat want to guess what the reading at grade level rate is according to the National School Report Card? What percentage of children today are reading at grade level nationwide? Does anyone want to take a guess in the chat about what that is? Because every time we talk about, we have to teach children about race because they have questions about race. Well, what you're saying is that we need to take things away that we're teaching them in order to spend all this time, all day, every day, talking about race. So what are you taking away from them? What are you taking away? So we've got some guesses in the chat. Fantastic, Dan. It's around 30%. Fantastic, Dan got it right. I believe the last time I looked, I think it was like 37%. So that is about right. That is about right. It is about 1/3 of students in public schools today are reading at grade level. 1/3 of students are reading at grade level. So why aren't we focusing on teaching them how to read? Why aren't we focusing on teaching them how to write? Why aren't we focusing on teaching them math? Why aren't we focusing on teaching them basics? Why are we confusing children who are not even equipped? We're talking about they start teaching kids this shit at 4 years old. These students are not even equipped to understand what race is. So why are we putting all this time and energy into having in-depth discussions with 6-year-olds about race when you should be teaching them how to read?
The potential alternative during a screaming match at Thanksgiving. But the panic over CRT threatens to shut those conversations down. And that is not all it is likely to do, because some pushing this panic the hardest are actually using it to advance a much bigger agenda that they've wanted for a very long time, and that is school choice. Basically, letting parents take tax dollars afforded to the...
Yes, I am very much in favor. Why isn't John Oliver in favor of allowing every Black child in America to pick out the school that they want to go to? Why isn't John Oliver in favor of allowing every Black family to choose the school that's best for them? Now, the reason I say Black children is not that I'm only in favor of school choice for Black children. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying at all. However, if school choice was available for everyone, then Black children would be included in that. And sometimes we have to speak leftist. Sometimes we have to speak in language that these people understand. Why doesn't John Oliver want every Black child and Black family in America to be able to send their children to whatever school they think is best? I think that would be pretty great. Why don't you want that, John? It seems a little bit racist that you don't want that, John. Why are you upholding systemic racism, John? Why don't you want Black families to have choice, John? If we make that argument, like fundamental to that is like if everyone has school choice, Black kids have school choice as well. Because, and the reason I say that is Nicole Hannah-Jones, who is the person who created the 1619 Project, she says all the time that when Republicans argue for school choice, they are not arguing for Black students to have choice. They're only arguing for white students. That's fundamentally ridiculous. So why don't we just start arguing, well, why can't Black students go to whatever school they want to? It's okay to speak leftist sometimes, is what I'm saying. Sam says they will fix this by lowering the standards soon. Well, they just did that with speech development. The CDC, I covered this on F'd Up News yesterday. The CDC lowered the standard for speech development because their policies over the last 2 years have led to a 350% decrease in speech development among children. So they just lowered the standard to make it okay. All right, let's keep going.
The public schooling of their kid and use them at any school they like. Here is Chris Rufo again, laying out that exact strategy.
First, we have to just get it out of schools. We have to ban it and abolish it. But in the long term, what we need to do is give every parent in this country a right to exit failing institutions. No child should be trapped in a failing public school that violates his sense of conscience, that violates the values of the parents. Every parent should take those education dollars anywhere that they wish.
Right.
School choice will liberate people, it will empower people, and it will actually depolarize some of these national fights that we've seen.
Oh,
yes.
So you're doing all of this to tone down partisan fights, are you, Chris? Very cool of you. You've probably noticed that general wave of calm, chill vibes sweeping the nation lately.
Wait. John Oliver is blaming Chris Rufo for political division? John, look in the fucking mirror. What are you doing on this show if not creating political division? You're seriously blaming Chris Rufo for this? Dude. That is like an epic lack of self-awareness right there, John.
If there is one word I would use to describe every image coming out of a school board meeting these days, it is depolarized. Look, it is not just Rufo. Conservative organizations that have long pushed for school choice, like the Heritage Foundation and Freedom Works, have poured money into this fight. And of course, no school choice push would be complete without lifelong rich person and occasional education secretary Betsy DeVos, who wrote an op-ed titled, "Let's Liberate Kids from Race Indoctrination with School Choice." And you should know, this is just nothing new. There is a long history of responding to racial panic.
Why don't you want black children to have school choice, John? Why don't you want black families to have school choice, John? It seems a little bit racist that you want to keep black children in failing schools in the inner cities when they could just go to the white schools right down the road, but they can't because they don't have school choice. But if they had school choice, they could just go to the white schools. Why do you want to keep failing children or black children in failing schools, John? These are how we need to be framing the questions. I'm sorry. Like, I understand that people don't like speaking in race because it's exactly the opposite of what we want, but sometimes you have to speak leftist. Why do you want black children to be caught in failing public schools? Why don't you want black children to have the same choices that rich parents have, which is a little bit racist in of itself because it assumes that all black people are poor? I'm going to overlook that because the argument is that every black child in America, if we had school choice, would be able to get out of the failing inner city schools, go to whatever school they want. I don't know why we aren't pushing this argument anymore. It just turns their whole argument around on them. That's exactly what we should be doing.
With a push for school choice. In fact, the roots of the school choice movement trace back to the Brown versus Board of Education decision when southern states adopted voucher programs to facilitate the creation of private schools called segregation academies. And some of those taking advantage of school choice today sure seem to be doing some heavy indoctrination of their own. Take Florida. It is one of the states that allows public money to go to voucher schools. And a few years back, an investigation into some of them found commonly used textbooks that downplayed the horrors of slavery. One of them is this one, America, Land I Love, which has all the kind of...
How are they defining downplayed the horrors of slavery? How are they defining that? Because he's gonna say this like it's a statement of fact. And I could easily say, if this textbook doesn't teach critical race theory, then it's downplaying the horrors of slavery. So what does John exactly mean by that? I'm sure we're not actually going to find out.
Bullshit that you would expect that the Civil War was fought for states' rights. But it also states that during the antebellum period, the slave who knew Christ had more freedom than a free person who did not know the Savior.
All right. They shouldn't be teaching that shit. I'm sorry. I'm actually on John Oliver's side on this one. And frankly, conservatives, I hate that you make me say this. Stop teaching Christianity in schools. Stop it. And this is why. This is why I yell at conservatives about the book banning shit. We should not be banning books in schools. Book banning should be completely off the table. And I bet he's going to bring that up in the course of this video too. And it's entirely because conservative groups went beyond what was necessary to follow their goddamn pet projects. Stop teaching Christianity in schools. That shouldn't be taught. And not only should that not be taught, but every time you guys do this crap, you are giving people like him ammo to use against the rest of us.
Which is not just offensive, it is profoundly stupid. Any kid reading that absolute trombone...
And by the way, I don't give a fuck if it was cherry-picked. I don't give a fuck. I do not care. Until you guys start playing smart, you are not going to win, and you are hurting the rest of us. Every single time the conservatives are like, why don't we just remove these books about race and replace them with the Bible? You hurt the fight. I am so sick of yelling at conservatives over this issue. They simply cannot wrap their head around the fact that just because we are against critical race theory does not mean we are against talking about race. Just because we are against critical race theory does not mean we are in favor of banning books. Just because I don't want the 1619 Project taught does not mean you get to teach people that slaves who knew Christ had more freedom than a free person who did not know Christ. That is mixing religion in schools. It means you do not believe in the First Amendment. Stop pulling this shit. I know I'm not yelling at most of the people in the chat right now. I want to acknowledge that. But it's like every single time, here's what conservatives are. Conservatives are like the kids that are helping mom out cook dinner in the kitchen. When mom's cooking dinner, conservatives are like the 3-year-old that comes and says, Mommy, I want to help you cook dinner. And mommy says, okay, honey, you can do this thing. You can mix this thing. And then the kid feels like they're helping, but in fact, they're just creating a giant mess that mom then has to clean up after the kid goes to bed. That's what conservatives are like in this fight. They completely derail from what it should be in the first place. Stop trying to ban books and stop trying to teach Christianity in schools. You're making shit harder, and I don't agree with that stuff either.
Slide of a sentence would instantly drop 2 full grades. It sounds less like something you'd find in a textbook and more like something you'd find crocheted on a throw pillow in Paula Dean's living room. So, if you want to talk about racial indoctrination of school kids, this might be a better place to start. But the thing is, even a manufactured panic is a panic. Those parents at school board meetings are genuinely angry. And as any little league coach knows, once you reach a critical mass of angry white parents, there will be consequences. In Texas, this high school principal was forced out of his job after being accused at a school board meeting of promoting CRT by someone who wasn't even a parent at his school. And in Tennessee, this current affairs teacher was fired for not giving varying points of view after he gave students a Ta-Nehisi Coates article and showed them Kyla Janae Lacey's poem, White Privilege. And he actually had...
Those are not diverse views. Those two people agree. Those are not diverse views. Those two people agree. Ta-Nehisi Coates is a critical race theorist. Those two people agree. He got fired for teaching critical race theory, which is against the law in the state of Tennessee.
A pretty decent response to that criticism.
I think, to me, the varying viewpoint is Kyla Janae Lacey and is Ta-Nehisi Coates. Those are perspectives that my students aren't exposed to.
No, that's
on a
not
daily
reasonable.
basis because
he broke the law in Tennessee. That's why he was fired. He broke the law in Tennessee. And he's saying that the diverse viewpoints are the fact that he taught his students black authors. Please. No. Wrong. Incorrect answer. You purposefully broke the law. That's why you got fired.
You know, we live in that white, dominant, evangelical environment.
Right. When you live in a mostly white environment, the voices of black people can be the varying point of view. And not just on current events, either on lots of things that white people might otherwise assume, even trivial ones, like it's okay to go out in a blizzard in shorts, and if I argue with this cop, I can probably get out of a ticket, and time travel would be a fun and stress-free activity. Ooh, the 1930s, I can't wait to look around. Unfortunately, though, those situations are now only likely to become more common. Since January of last year, 37 states have introduced bills or taken other steps that would restrict teaching
How
critical
great is
race
that?
theory
How
or
awesome is
limit
that?
how teachers can discuss racism. And the justification for these has often been more than a little flimsy. Here is one Tennessee lawmaker explaining why he was pushing for his state's bill.
Listen to the following quotes from an email forwarded to me concerning a 7-year-old girl in Williamson County. The little girl told her mother, "I'm ashamed that I'm white." The daughter then asked her mother, "Is there something wrong with me? Why am I hated so much?"
Okay, I hear that, I really do. But the thing to do in that situation isn't to pass a law limiting the discussion of race in the classroom. It's to ask literally one follow-up question like, what was happening to make you think the other kids hate you? Or did any adult step in when you felt this way? Or do you even exist? Because you should know when reports...
That's what they're teaching kids in schools. Now, that's not taught all the time, but yeah, that is absolutely what they teach kids in schools, John. That is absolutely what they teach. And instead, he's like, oh, she probably doesn't even exist. Okay, I can show you classes on my goddamn channel of this happening. Are you shitting me? Gabrielle Clark, who is not white, sued her son's school, who tried to make her son, who is biracial but very light-skinned, say he was an oppressor in order to graduate. Saying that this shit doesn't happen in schools is just fundamentally false. There is currently a lawsuit in Nevada right now, the first lawsuit ever for critical race theory in the country, in which a biracial but light-skinned student was told by his teacher and his principal that he had to say he was an oppressor in class in order to graduate because of the color of his skin. This is not theoretical. This is in the courts right now.
Just looked into this, they found no parent had come forward to that school's principal, teachers, or district officials with that complaint, and administrators weren't able to pinpoint any student who might be upset or lessons that could have been upsetting. And if that is how we are arguing things now, I should probably mention that I too just so happen to have an email forward from a different little white girl, way cuter than the first one, by the way, who said that first girl's story is complete bullshit. And the thing is, by Tennessee law, it seems I simply have to believe her. But that lawmaker
believe all women.
Illustrates the problem facing legislators currently trying to outlaw something that they cannot define. Because what are you then going to do? Pass a law saying kids can't feel bad? Well, it turns out, yes, because that is exactly what Tennessee did. They passed a law prohibiting any teaching that would cause discomfort, guilt, anguish, or distress solely because of the individual's race or sex, which is...
Yes, they literally cannot teach that you should feel guilty because you are white. They cannot teach that you should feel guilty for being a man. That is what that means. If a teacher is teaching that students should feel guilty because they are white, or they should feel guilty because they are a man, that is what that law eliminates. So it's not about the discomfort. It is about the practice of teaching that you are an oppressor if you are white or a man or straight or cisgendered or any of these other things. That is what the law is.
Very broad. And you know what? You're not going to believe this, but I just received another email this second from a third Tennessee white girl who says,
like, how did I
what
used to
fucking
think this was
idiots
funny?
are
This
writing
isn't
these
funny.
laws, and how many fictitious children are they going to make up to justify them? P.S. I honestly preferred the new Zazu. And wow, what a nice thing to say from a definitely...
I mean, this really isn't funny, isn't it? Like, it's like, how did I ever think this was funny? This is what's going... Like, is this how conservatives have always felt watching TV? Like, this isn't funny.
Real child. And look, the thing is, we have talked before on this show about the multiple problems with teaching kids
hang on. Reagan is making a great point in the chat. John Oliver is making fun of a child. Now, I understand that John Oliver doesn't think that that child actually exists, but John Oliver right now is making a joke about a child. Wow.
Version of US history, and how, as far back as a century ago, groups like the United Daughters of the Confederacy were reshaping textbooks to downplay its horrors. And it seems, here we go again, I guess. because lawmakers are trying to micromanage school curriculums, sometimes pretty ineptly. A bill proposed in Virginia contains a section listing some of the founding documents that is okay to teach, a list that includes the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the first debate between Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, which I hope you know is not a thing that happened. The Lincoln-Douglas debates were, of course, between Senator Stephen Douglas and his opponent, a 2020 Lincoln Navigator. So read your history,
He's
everyone.
not wrong about
Facts
that.
matter
That's
here.
true. Yeah, that's true.
But
Yeah.
maybe the most insulting distortion of history is in the quote that every single anti-CRT activist seems to love to invoke.
Martin Luther King.
Think about what MLK stood for. He said he didn't
There's
want
Chris
people
Rufo.
judged on the
Rufo.
color of their skin, but on the content of their character.
You know, I believe it was Martin Luther King that said, you know, when he was talking about his children, that
he didn't want his children
Oh,
to be
Ruben.
judged
On the color of their skin.
but by the content of their character.
Content of their character, not by the color of their skin.
Content of our character, not the color of our skin.
And the immortal words of Dr. Martin Luther King ring in our ears that we must judge others not by the
Color of their skin.
but by the content of their character.
The left wants us to constantly focus on skin color. It's destructive. Martin Luther King Jr. is rolling over in his grave.
Why doesn't John Oliver like people saying that we shouldn't judge people by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character? That seems like a pretty admirable thing to aspire to. It was just but a few years ago that Democrats would have agreed that we should not judge people by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And now all of a sudden we're not allowed to say that? Why doesn't John Oliver want to create a society in which we are judging people by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin? Why is that all of a sudden considered bad? Let's see.
You know what? I bet he is, actually. In fact, I'm pretty sure every time someone uses his words...
Now, the reason, I'm going to tell you the reason before John Oliver says it. The reason that they do not like invoking MLK is because what leftists teach now is that if MLK hadn't been assassinated, that he would be totally in support of critical race theory, that he was just a Marxist, that he just didn't get the chance to do it, but he would be totally in support of critical race theory. He would be totally in support of what Ibram X. Kendi teaches, which is present-day discrimination to account for past discrimination. That's what they're going to say. I'm going to bet.
way, Dr. King's illustrious remains spin fast enough to power the eastern fucking seaboard. Here is the thing, though. That dream speech was clearly an aspirational goal, not a description of things as they stood. And in fact, King himself later put a pretty major...
Then why wouldn't it still be an aspirational goal? If it was an aspirational goal then why wouldn't it still be an aspirational goal now?
Asterisk on it.
I must confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare. And I've come to see that we have many more difficult days ahead, and some of the old optimism was a little superficial, and now it must be tempered with a solid realism.
Yeah, exactly.
What year was that?
Published that same
What
year
year was that?
He wrote that while the
What year?
majority of white Americans consider themselves sincerely committed to justice for the Negro, and they believe that American society is essentially...
That was in 1967. Is John Oliver really arguing that nothing in America has changed since 1967? Is that really what John Oliver's arguing right now? Is that we should take a Martin Luther King quote from 1967, 70, 80, 90, 07, 17, 25 goddamn years ago. No, not 25. 55 goddamn years ago. I couldn't do math. Sorry, I used to be good at math. Now I have a calculator on my phone. I lost the ability. 55 fucking years ago. Wait, maybe 65. I don't know. A long ass time ago. Someone tell me how many years it's been since 1967. I have no idea. But it was a long ass time ago. Is John Oliver actually saying that a quote from a long time ago is representative? 55. I got it right at one point. 55 years ago. Is John Oliver arguing that the present day state of our country is the same as it was 55 years ago?
Hospitable to fair play and to steady growth toward a middle-class utopia embodying racial harmony. Unfortunately, this is a fantasy of self-deception and comfortable vanity.
And
So
nothing
while it
has
is
changed
clearly
in
very
55 years.
appealing to
Nothing
create
has
a
changed.
version
We've
of
made
history
no
where
progress
MLK was a
at
tiny
all.
figure who existed solely to help white people win arguments. The truth is, he later reflected on his own message and challenged white people to look more deeply at themselves.
And then 55 years passed. And then 55 years passed in which we made significant progress towards equality, in which we made significant progress to where my generation was taught on after-school specials that you don't treat people differently based on the color of their skin. I was taught that if you have a white egg and a brown egg, the inside of the egg is the same, because we made significant progress in the last 55 goddamn years. They like to pretend that nothing has changed since the civil rights movement. They like to pretend that no progress has been made. They like to pretend that black people are still not allowed to sit at lunch counters. They like to pretend that all of these things are still exactly the same way as they were when Martin Luther King gave what was an aspirational speech then, but then we got pretty dang close. Not perfectly, but made significant progress towards that aspiration. And because we made significant progress towards that aspiration, they had to turn around and go right back in the other direction. Critical race theory creates more racism. Critical race theory is de-evolution from where we came from.
That is something the kids should absolutely be learning about in school. But the problem is, they won't if these laws continue.
That's not true.
A white parent could
That is
plausibly
not
claim
true.
that reading MLK's writing
No.
made their child feel discomfort on
No.
the basis of their race. And some of these laws seem designed to bend schools' curriculums to the sensibilities of the most conservative, alarmed parents.
So I'm going to say this. The law in New Hampshire, which is, of course, the law that I know the best, says that any of these things can be taught in schools as long as they are not taught with a specific perspective, as long as you are teaching them from an objective perspective. The law prevents activism in schools. It does not prevent the teaching of race. It does not prevent discussions of race. It does not prevent any of these things. It prevents activism. It prevents teachers teaching from one specific political perspective and then not allowing any discussion of any other political perspective.
In Florida, Ron DeSantis is pushing a Stop Woke Act. That was him unveiling it just a minute ago with Chris Rufo, by the way, right behind him. And that would give parents private right of action to sue if they think their kids are being taught CRT. And all of these laws are already having chilling effects. Book bans are on the rise around the country.
See, told you guys
And
he
one
was going to mention
Oklahoma
that.
school district
I
has even
told you he was going to
teachers
mention the
simply to
goddamn book
avoid
bans.
using
I
terms
fucking
like
told you.
diversity and white privilege. And look, here's the thing. You can ban all the books you want. You can try and legislate it away. But as any black woman on The Bachelor can tell you, talking about race is unavoidable. And it is not just unavoidable, it's essential, especially in the places where people are most panicked about CRT. And this actually brings us all the way back to where this story began in Loudoun County, Virginia, where that school board meeting got so very far out of hand. Here is one of the leaders of the anti-CRT push there, explaining just why she is so fiercely opposed to it being taught.
In Loudoun County, this is the wealthiest county in the country. There's not a lot of racism. There are silly people that...
Why aren't they showing Azra Nomani? I don't know who this woman is. I have no idea who this woman is at all. Why aren't they showing Azra Nomani? They're not showing Azra Nomani because she's not white. That's why they're not showing her.
that say stupid things, but if you talk about it less, you're going to notice that division less. I don't look at the person based on their skin color. I look at them based on their character.
Conservatives should not be
there's
allowed to
a
go
lot
on
of obvious
television.
red flags there from
I'm sorry. This is why conservatives need to stop going on fucking liberal television. I don't know why every single time this is a conservative woman problem too. I don't see men making this mistake. Every single time a conservative woman goes on CNN or does something with Showtime or does something with Vice or any of these things, they say something that inevitably makes them look stupid later. I'm sorry. I'm just going to speak the truth. Stop going on major media. Stop. You do not help the situation. You don't win anyone over. You inevitably give them the ammo they need to make you look dumb. And by extension, everyone else look dumb. It is always used against us. No, and then is it a conservative woman or a liberal actress? No, this is a real conservative woman. Stop making excuses and saying, secret leftist. No, this is not a secret leftist. Stop using that excuse. It's like, this is so predictable how conservatives react in every single circumstance. She should have said, no, I don't want to come on your show, but you can interview Azra Nomani, because that would have been significantly more difficult for them to cut out of context to make her look stupid. If there is one lesson that conservative women need to learn, is stop accepting invitations to go on leftist media. It never works out. It never ends well, ever.
Confidently asserting there's not a lot of racism here, to the I don't see skin color, to the you won't notice division so much if you just don't talk about it. And hey, if the problem with racism
I
in America
understand
was
people
only
like going on TV,
Patty
but like
Mendes
it
out, then
doesn't
yeah,
actually
shutting
help.
up about it would probably
You have to
solve
care
the
more
whole
about
issue.
winning than you care about
But
going on
guess how long
TV.
it takes for that conversation to take a real turn?
I think there are probably plenty of people that would agree with exactly that. But just to be fair, on the other side, there are people, especially young black men, for example, who would say, I would love to not be judged on the color of my skin.
Do you think it's more on the color of their skin or their actions?
Oh my fucking
how
God.
They're dressed, how they perceive, how they respect others. If you have a kid that's pulled over by a cop, does it really matter what color they are, or is it the respect that they give to that police officer?
What?
Do you guys understand how what that woman said just sounded incredibly racist? Do you understand that? What she just said sounded incredibly goddamn racist. I am not on this woman's side. I am not on this woman's team. What she just said is what I have heard come out of the mouths of many conservatives, and it sounds incredibly racist. And this is why they're inviting her on TV. Because they want everyone to think that everyone in the anti-CRT movement is like her. That was really goddamn racist, what she just said.
Wow. When you respond to someone mentioning young black men
and by
would
the
like to
way,
be treated better.
She might not actually be like a bad person. I'm going to leave the door open to the fact that she was unaware that what she was saying sounds incredibly racist. I'm sure it was unintentional, but at the same time, like, this is not the first time I've heard crap like this come out of the mouths of conservative women on major TV. And it doesn't help any of us. It doesn't help any of us. You need to want to win more than you want to go on TV.
Better by automatically envisioning them dressed terribly and acting disrespectfully while being arrested by the police. You are telling on yourself, Patty. You are snitching on your very soul. And as for her claim there that there is not a lot of racism in Loudoun County, you probably already assumed that that was bullshit, but you should know. An assessment of public schools there found that it was shocking the extent to which students report the use of the N-word. And I think as a society, we've now agreed white people should not be using the N-word a shocking number of times, unless, that is, they have a lucrative podcast deal with Spotify. But that is absolutely
Oh, there we go.
it. And all of this brings us to the main point here. That for all the laws being passed to prevent discomfort or anguish on account of an individual's race, whose discomfort exactly are we prioritizing here? Because kids of color can tell you they don't get a choice to not talk about race and have it go away, like this graduate of Loudoun County Schools.
I do understand that many parents don't want their children learning about race at such a young age, but I beg to differ in that sense. We learn about race every day when we're the only colored kid in our classrooms, or when we're...
Teaching critical race theory is not the same thing as having discussions about race. Teaching critical race theory is not the same thing as having discussions about race. Teaching critical race theory is not the same thing as having discussions about race. These are not the same thing. They're not. But again, to go back to conservatives, because I think we can all pretty much see that John Oliver is full of shit. I don't really think there needs to be any additional effort in debunking John Oliver. But to go back to conservatives for a second, when conservatives are going on CNN like Moms for Liberty did and arguing to ban books about race, then they are contributing to this problem. They are contributing to the perception problem. It really does seem like now, like conservatives, and this is part of the reason that I'm concerned about Chris Rufo fucking around with like the definition of language, is because I think that an unintended consequence of that entire strategy, and again, I understand why he's doing it. This is not a knock on Rufo. I do understand why he's doing it, but an unintended consequence of that strategy is that now conservatives, some conservatives, not all conservatives, seem to think that every discussion about race is critical race theory, and that's not true either. That is not true. We need, like, just because you don't want a very specific, just because you don't want racism taught in schools, which is, I mean, the whole basis of critical race theory is that we need to reduce racial disparities so that they're completely eliminated, which is all about equity, which is equality of outcomes, which is Marxist. That doesn't mean you ban teachings about slavery. It doesn't mean you ban teachings about the civil rights movement. It doesn't mean you ban any of those things. And this is something that is being confused on both sides. On both sides. And that is a problem.
Learning about slavery and all the heads turned to us. So one way or another, one group of students will learn about race before another. So we believe that it would be equitable if all students learned about race in the same context.
Equitable. He just
so
used the word. Why does that student know the word equity?
Yeah.
Why does he know the
Children of
word
colour
equity?
learn about race from a very young age.
Why does that student even know the word equity? Because he's being taught Marxism in schools. That is not a simple discussion of race. That student should not know the word equity. The word equity was created, well, redefined, I should say. It wasn't created. It was redefined like 5 or 6 years ago to mean this equity bullshit about reducing disparities down to nothing. That student should not know that word. So that is proof that critical race theory is being taught in those schools.
Realizing you celebrate different holidays or get different safety talks, or the first time you go to a white friend's house and you're served a casserole. You realize very quickly in that moment, we are different people with different cultures. So look, by this point, it should be pretty clear. The debate around critical race theory is both very loud and very, very dumb. But unfortunately, it is important to engage with it, because if we don't, the endpoint that we are heading toward is that honest discussions of race will be shut out of public schools, even as some parents fuck off to voucher academies where their kids can learn a version of history that's basically antebellum fan fiction. And I am not saying that discussions on race will always be comfortable for everyone in a classroom, but think about it like this. When was learning and growing as a person ever really comfortable? The thing to do here isn't to run from those discussions or pass laws banning them. It is to learn how to have them better. Because for generation after generation, we've told school kids fairy tales about race in this country. And maybe it's time we stop doing.
Why does John Oliver convince that schools are taught fairy tales about racism? Because that's not true either. I learned about slavery. I learned about the civil rights movement. I learned about the horrors of it. I learned about all that stuff in schools. Was I taught a fairy tale in schools just because I wasn't taught that America was founded in 1619 on the basis of race?
Doing that. Because all it's done so far is get us to the point that we're at right now, with full-grown adults insisting America can't be racist because we elected Obama twice, that racism will go away if we just don't mention it, and that Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech wasn't an aspiration we have yet to fulfill, but some kind of magic spell that ended prejudice then and there. That is our show. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week. Good night.
All right. I guess that's the end of the reaction video. I hope I hope me yelling at the computer for an hour was worth it. Realize says that casserole joke was bigoted and racist. And listen, I want to say too, hang on, let me see. Melanie, I'm going to speak to this point. Leftists pick the videos that make conservatives look bad. Guess what? They would have no choice if conservative women stopped going on leftist media and saying stupid shit. They're using the content that conservative women are giving them because they're more interested in going on TV and being an influencer and having all this stuff than they are in actually winning. So if conservative women stopped going on leftist media and saying stupid shit, then they would have no videos to work from. All right. that is the show for today, guys. Now, just as a reminder, hang on. If you enjoyed, oh gosh, I just screwed up my entire computer screen. Oh no. Hang on, I got to show you something on the screen. If you enjoyed the show, please mount that like button on your way out the door. Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I do this daily at 5 p.m. on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday on my main channel. I will be back tomorrow with a great conversation with Dr. Howard Asher. And of course, in my locals community, we will be transitioning into a locals Zoom call in 20 minutes. So if you would like to get on a private Zoom with me and many of my beloved members of my amazing locals community, the best community on all of locals, make sure you sign up on kb.locals.com/support. You can join as a supporter for $5 a month. You can join for $50 a year, which gives you 2 months for free. You can make a one-time gift, and any of these contributions will get you access to our private Zoom call that we are doing and starting in 20 minutes. We do these Zoom calls twice a week. We do them on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We do them on Wednesdays at noon. We also do Bitchcraft, which is on the second Saturday of every month, which is a craft and bitch. We're going to do book club. Our next book club is going to get announced tomorrow on the stream because I have Dr. Howard Asher returning tomorrow, and he's launching his new book, and we're going to be reading it for book club, and I'm really excited about it. So make sure you sign up, and I will see many of you in about 20 minutes. All right, guys, that's all I have. I got to go get some food before we jump into our Zoom call, which usually lasts about 3 hours. So I will see you guys very soon. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.